So, autonomic nervous system. So, before we talk about autonomic nervous system, let's first talk about nervous system. So, basically, nervous system is divided into two. These are the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. So, central nervous system is basically located in the brain and in the spinal cord, while peripheral nervous system is located outside of the brain and also in the spinal cord. So, autonomic nervous system, or ANS. So, the ANS acts on smooth muscles and glands. This controls and regulates the heart, respiratory system, GI tract, bladder, eyes, and glands. The ANS is also involuntary, meaning a person has little or no control. Compared to somatic, it is voluntary, meaning a person has control. So there are two types of neurons, two sets rather. So these are the afferent or sensory neurons and the efferent neurons. So afferent neurons sends impulses to the CNS for interpretation. Meanwhile, the efferent neurons receives impulses or information from the brain and transmits it to the spinal cord to the effector transmit it from the spinal cord rather to the effector organ cells. So there are two branches, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So functions of ANS. So sympathetic division as mentioned earlier. So the sympathetic division functions in response in action requiring quick responses rather. So or fight or flight. Meanwhile, parasympathetic division functions with a function that do not require immediate reaction or rest and digest. So in the sympathetic division, this might be triggered in the face of perceived threat. For example, a person who is terrified of heights might begin to experience the acute stress response when he goes to the top of the floor to attend a meeting. Meanwhile, parasympathetic, so example for this is salivation. The PSNS stimulates production of saliva, which contains enzymes to help your food digest. So, two subsystems of ANS. So, the sympathetic nervous system allows body to function under stress, as mentioned earlier, fight or flight, prime body for intense skeletal muscle activity. And parasympathetic nervous system is maintenance function, rest and digest, counterbalances sympathetic functions. Sympathetic and parasympathetic effect on the body tissues. So, in the eyes, so in the sympathetic response, the pupils dilate. Meanwhile, in the parasympathetic response, the pupils constrict. In the lungs, the bronchioles dilates, and in the parasympathetic response, it constricts bronchioles and increases secretion. In the heart, increases heart rate, and parasympathetic decreases heart rate. Blood vessels constricts blood vessels. Parasympathetic dilates blood vessels. Gastrointestinal relaxes smooth muscles of gastrointestinal tract. And parasympathetic response increases peristalsis. Bladder relaxes bladder muscles and constricts bladder muscles. So in the urethus, it relaxes ureter muscles. Meanwhile, in the parasympathetic response of the urethus, there is none. So, salivary gland, none in the sympathetic response, and increases salivation. So, comparison between somatic and autonomic nervous system. So, characteristics sensory neurons. So, in the somatic rather, nervous system, somatic senses and special senses. So, the somatic senses are to detect touch, pain, pressure, temperature, and tension on the skin and in internal organs, while the special senses are the ones to detect senses of smell, taste, hearing, and sight. And autonomic nervous system mainly from interoceptors located in blood vessels, visceral organ, nervous system that monitor internal environment. Vector affects the skeletal muscle, and meanwhile in the autonomic nervous system, it affects the cardiac muscles, smooth muscles, and the glands. So control of motor neurons. So voluntary control from cerebral cortex with contribution from basal ganglia, cerebellum, brainstem, and spinal cord. The autonomic nervous system is involuntary control from hypothalamus, limbic system, brainstem, and spinal cord. It's limited control from cerebral cortex. That is all. Thank you.